When my home is invaded by squatters, will I unravel Mr. Thompson's sinister conspiracy before it's too late? I stood frozen in disbelief on the threshold of what I thought was still my home, just a few days after a quick weekend getaway. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow on the newly installed lock that glinted like a cruel joke against the faded blue paint of my front door. I could see through the cracked windows there they were furniture, clutter, and a sense of overwhelming defiance. My heart raced, a primal fear clawing at my insides. Just a few days ago, I had unloaded boxes, dreaming of cozy evenings and the laughter of friends filling my new space. Now it felt like a specter of joy had turned into a twisted nightmare. As the realization hit me like a sledgehammer, I remembered Mr. Thompson, the charismatic real estate agent with his slick-back hair and disarming smile. He had sold me this dream of homeownership, spinning stories of vibrant community life and open skies. Now, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been sold a bill of goods, a facade designed to distract from the problems lurking beneath the surface. My blood ran cold as I dialed 911, praying that somehow this could be fixed, that maybe there had been a mistake. The dial tone echoed ominously, each beep resonating in a fog of despair. While waiting, I brushed my fingers against the peeling paint of the doorframe, summoning the courage I needed. I recalled the glossy brochures boasting energy efficiency, low maintenance, and the promise of a family-friendly neighborhood. Yet there I was, a naive victim of Mr. Thompson's charm, staring into the abyss of a house now occupied by strangers. The squatter saga unfolded like a bad plot twist. Right there, in my front yard, a couple lounged on my patio furnituria, mismatched assortment of plaid couches and outdated recliners, as if they had brought a piece of their old life with them. Their laughter echoed through the air, a mocking melody that twisted my gut. I learned they claimed adverse possession under Texas law, a legal loophole I had never even heard of until that moment. It was almost comical how quickly they had settled in, asserting a false claim to my home. I glanced nervously up and down my quiet street, the stillness almost eerie. Not a soul seemed to be around, despite the sun beginning to dip low in the sky, painting the world in shades of fiery orange and shadow. Where were my neighbors, those friendly faces who had welcomed me just a week ago? I felt utterly isolated, desperate for someone to reaffirm that I wasn't losing my grasp on reality. On a whim, I hollered for help. "Hey, this is my house," as if they could hear me from the depths of my own backyard. The sound of my own voice broke through the chaos in my mind, and for a moment, I envisioned storming inside, reclaiming my space like a wild animal protecting its den. But instinct told me to breathe, to think clearly. I clutched my phone tightly, convinced that the call might cut through the absurdity of this situation, beckoning order from absolute pandemonium. Anxiety and adrenaline swirl through me like a cyclone, blinding me to the complicated protocols that would soon frustrate my efforts to return home. "Please, send someone. I'm at 123 Willow Creek." I pleaded into the phone, a tremor in my voice that confirmed my own growing sense of panic. Somehow, in my heart, I felt that law enforcement would be my savior in all of this, a shield against these opposing forces that had taken over my life. However, when I hung up and looked around, the laughter continued, unfazed, as if they were already claiming territory that didn't belong to them, refreshing beverages in hand, as if my home had become a bustling summer squatter party. My thoughts veered to the legal complexities ahead, to the whispers of civil disputes that taunted me from outside my door. I felt vulnerable, exposed, my own sanctuary, turning into a battleground, shrouded in a veil of bureaucratic red tape. Texas property laws seemed to favor the encroacher, leaving legitimate homeowners bound by delays and indecisions. Just when I thought I was on the brink of a breakdown, the irony washed over me. The American dream of homeownership had transformed into a nightmare of powerlessness and frustration. It was clear I was in for a fight, a battle not just for my house, but for my dignity. But as the sun lowered, casting eerie shadows across my porch, I discovered a sliver of resolve blooming inside me. I wouldn't go down without a fight. If it was a war over my property they wanted, then they had awakened a warrior. I would reclaim my home, even if it meant battling dark and complex laws, unscrupulous squatters, and perhaps the mighty Mr. Thompson himself. With renewed determination coursing through me, I took a step forward, ready to face the challenges ahead. The journey had only just begun, and I could feel the weight of both impending conflict and a glimmer of hope looming on the horizon. But little did I know, help might come from an unexpected source, someone who knew more about Mr. Thompson than I could ever have imagined. As I stood outside my own house, shouting for a squad car, the squatters danced inside like they owned the place, led by a smarmy man named Greg, whose laughter was a mockery of my despair. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that felt like ghostly fingers creeping up my spine as I fisted my phone in desperation. dialing the police once more. I could see the glint of someone's reflection through the front window, Greg's gleeful grin, as if he were welcoming me to my own funeral. The sound of their revelry was almost dizzying, like the thrumming of a chaotic party that had invaded my once quiet home. I felt my rage boil over, igniting a determination deep within me to reclaim my space, my sanctuary. When the police finally arrived, their presence felt hollow, as they exchanged glances with the squatters and then delivered the crushing news. It was a civil matter. They had no right to trespass, but there was no immediate action they could take. My heart sank, each beat in my chest amplifying a sense of betrayal that coursed through my veins. "You've got to be kidding me. They're in my house," I shouted, madness swirling in my words. The officers shrugged, sympathetically perhaps, but their words felt like iron shackles on my spirit. I was caught in a web of useless bureaucracy that favored thieves over rightful owners, and as they turned to leave, I felt like a small child abandoned in a dark house. The squatters were emboldened by the authorities' inaction, their confidence swelling like a balloon ready to pop, pushing me closer to the brink. Sweeping anger replaced my initial shock, and I knew then that I had no choice but to confront Mr. Thompson. Maybe the smooth-talking agent could untangle this nightmare. Surely you could get the locks changed or something, I thought, familiar narratives of personal responsibility playing out in a twisted loop. I wanted to grab him, shake him until the truth spilled from his lips, but my gut told me I might only find more layers of deceit underneath his seemingly cordial facade. Rushing to my car, I fought through the swarm of emotions clouding my head. The sun was finally dipping below the horizon, casting everything into a shadowy gloom. I used the last remnants of daylight to craft a plan in my mind. First, the confrontation, and then, if need be, I would seek the cold, hard grip of the law once again. But this time, I would come equipped with the fire of determination and a desperate need for justice. Approaching Mr. Thompson's office felt surreal, like standing at the edge of a battlefield. The building was a quaint brick structure radiating the charm of a classic Texas estate agency, but the picturesque surroundings couldn't mask the brewing storm inside me. I felt unprepared for this battle against deception, yet also steely in resolve, my heart pounding as I imagined the conversation ahead. As I pushed through the glass door, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, but no amount of caffeine could calm the fury swirling within. Mr. Thompson sat behind his desk, his relaxed demeanor suggesting all was well in his world, a stark contrast to the state of my home. "Oh, you're back," he greeted, plastering an unnervingly bright smile across his face. The disconnect infuriated me. How could he smile when his negligence had allowed this chaos to flourish? "Mr. Thompson, I need to talk to you about what's happening at my house," I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. His eyes flickered, and for a moment I thought I caught a glimpse of someone who knew more than he was letting on. I pressed on, throwing allegations like grenades. Lies, negligence, connivance. His smile faltered ever so slightly, but he quickly recomposed himself, feigning ignorance. The tension between us crackled with intensity as I realized I had stepped into a den of manipulations too intricate to unravel easily. As I stood there, every word exchanged felt like a piece of a larger, darker puzzle just beyond my grasp. I sensed that I was merely a pawn in a game more elaborate than I ever anticipated. The evening cast a mild chill, echoing my anxiety, but a flicker of defiance surged through my veins. I wouldn't leave his office empty-handed. I demanded answers, and I wouldn't take no for an answer. But as Mr. Thompson spun some benign excuse about market fluctuations, I felt my resolve tightening around me like a noose. Something deep inside whispered that the truth of this nightmare was entwined with him, and I wouldn't stop until I exposed every rotten layer of this conspiratorial reality. With fiery determination boiling beneath my skin, I left his office knowing one thing: I would reclaim my house, no matter what it took. Nothing could prepare me for the discoveries awaiting to unfold that would shatter my understanding of loyalty, legality, and the very nature of justice itself. Confronting Mr. Thompson was like pressing my fist against a brick wall, both bewildering and infuriating. The sun hung low in the Texas sky, turning the late afternoon into a warm embrace of golden rays that felt far too cheerful for the chaos brewing in my heart. I stepped out of my car, my skin prickling with the heat born of anger and fear, and walked up to his porch, where a white wicker chair cradled him in apparent serenity. He smiled broadly, sipping iced tea from a garnished glass, as if I had just dropped by for a casual chat instead of seeking justice. "What a coincidence. You're back," he began, his voice dripping with insincerity, each syllable grating against my frayed nerves. The invitation to sit down was a clear tactic, a way to disarm me. "Mr. Thompson, you need to explain what's going on with my home," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Have you heard about the squatters?" His smile faltered for just a moment, and a flash of something darker flickered in his eyes. Was it guilt or mere surprise? Either way, I pressed on, determined not to let his facade deter me. I recounted the chaotic scene outside my front door, the laughter of the squatters echoing in my mind, the unyielding nature of the law, and my growing desperation as the days went by without resolution. Yes, I believe I did disclose everything," he replied, waving his hand dismissively as if my concerns were merely an inconvenience. My heart raced as I fought against the urge to shake him, to demand he reveal the truth behind his claims. Each fabricated principle he uttered felt like a layer of wax, building up on a candle desperate to hide the flame beneath, but only serving to illuminate his deceit. The tension hanging between us swelled, each syllable filled with unspoken accusations, yet I sensed his disingenuous charm masking a more insidious intent. In that moment, I couldn't shake the impression that Mr. Thompson wore a veil of affability while orchestrating this nightmare from the shadows. As I navigated our conversation, little details started to surface in my mind, the way he often seemed too pleased with his deals, the faint unease I felt each time we met. He was like a clever magician, distracting me with his confident patter while deftly pocketing his own misdeeds. Was he truly unaware of the squatters' bold invasion of my home? Or was he colluding with them for a quick payoff? When I left, the intensity of our confrontation clung to me like a thick fog, obscuring rational thought as I drove home. Each turn of the street felt like an insurmountable battle-war to reclaim my life from the clutches of these deceitful interlopers and the corrupt agent who had once promised me security. I returned under the blanket of twilight, drawn by the destination of my conflict. Yet anxiety twisted in my stomach as I approached my front door. I could feel the weight of inevitability pressing against my shoulders. I had to go deeper, ask more, and unravel the knots binding me to this charade. After hours restless with contemplation, I pored over every message we'd exchanged, every document I'd signed, searching for proof that Thompson had misled me. My stained fingertips traced the edge of the contract as if it could reveal secrets hidden in its folds. Interesting facts about Texas law on property began to flood my mind as I rebuilt my argument from the ground up. I remembered something about illegal possession, how the very laws that were meant to protect homeowners might also warp them into weapons of despair. Channeling new determination, I realized that with the right evidence, I could fight back this tide of treachery. The days turned into an emotional roller coaster. I spent hours studying the regulations regarding property ownership in Texas, seeking loopholes that would work in my favor. I reached out to anyone who could provide advice: a lawyer, friends, even neighbors who were equally outraged at the audacity of the squatters. With each conversation, I felt like a spider weaving a web, each thread intricately connected to its discovery, solidifying my resolve to unravel Mr. Thompson's lies. Yet Mr. Thompson continued to surface with a bemused expression, insisting on his innocence while appearing only more evasive. We exchanged frantic calls where he brushed off my concerns, claiming his hands were tied or that newly drawn laws had shifted the landscape. The more he distanced himself, the deeper my suspicions festered. The disparity between his feigned concern and my growing fervor gnawed at my psyche, sending chills down my spine. I needed to understand his true motives. I began to suspect he had an ulterior agenda, one that literally involved profitable backdoor dealings with the squatters, perhaps even some side agreement that promised them a nice slice of my pie, property-wise. Fistfuls of rage turned my thoughts dark as I imagined the conversations they must have shared, plotting, scheming, laughing at my expense. Each image pushed me closer to the precipice of fury. It felt as though I were standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss filled with malice and betrayal, fully realizing I needed to confront it to reclaim my home and, more importantly, my dignity. Finally, I resolved to see it through, intending to unearth the conspiracy lurking just beneath the surface. I knew my next step had to be bold. I would expose him, document everything, and tap into the pure vein of justice that my heart yearned for. A fierce surge of defiance surged within me. I wouldn't back down. I would confront him head on and unearth every lie, every hidden motive, until the dust settled. My house would be mine again, and no one, not even Mr. Thompson, would stand in my way. Each fraught breath I took returned me to the same nagging question. What if I was merely one of many, caught in a larger game between predators? As I plotted my comeback, the sensation of impending confrontations and legal battles mingled with fraying hope in a chaotic dance that felt both exhilarating and perilously close to failure. How could I stand against the tide of this widespread corruption? I didn't know how, but I was determined to fight, pushed by the fire of injustice demanding my home back. The encounter with Mr. Thompson deepened my resolve, but a storm awaited on the horizon that would test everything I had learned and forced me into an even fiercer negotiation against a shadowy scheme I had scarcely glimpsed the edges of. As the first light of dawn filtered through my window, cutting a sharp line across my cluttered desk, I opened my laptop, my heart racing. The air was heavy with the scent of coffee combined with my swirling anxieties, and the situation felt more suffocating than ever. I could no longer stand on the sidelines while my life unraveled at the hands of intruders. I needed to act, and act fast. The squatters, a group of individuals as cunning as they were brazen, continued to stake their claim on my home. I spent the morning feverishly drafting a post for social media, combining a heartfelt plea for help with the harsh reality of my situation. I anticipated revulsion, outrage, something that would ignite empathy and urgency in others to rally around my cause. As the words flowed, my fears morphed into a battle cry. My home has been taken from me under suspicious circumstances, and I am fighting for what is rightfully mine. I pressed send with a resolute click, hoping it would echo in the hearts of my friends and community. To my relief, my phone buzzed almost immediately. Friends shared my post and neighbors joined the chorus, pledging their support. Comments poured in, people mobilizing, eager to stand shoulder to shoulder against the brazen squatters who claimed my home as theirs. I allowed myself a flutter of hope, imagining the mob rallying around my front door, ready to confront the usurpers. This was the momentum I needed. It felt like I had caught the wind beneath my wings. Yet, just as I began to plan my triumphant return home, Greg surfaced with an audacity that shocked even my tempered nerves. I received an email that made my blood run cold. Greg, that smirking intruder with the swagger of an arrogant predator, had filed legal documents of his own. It was a carefully crafted maneuver, one that promised to stretch my already thin resources and tie me up in court for months, spent battling over what should have been a simple return to my own front door. I could picture him rejoicing, utterly confident that he had me backed into a corner. As I scanned through the papers filled with legal jargon, they loomed large like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Their audacity knew no bounds, and my feelings of indignation surged. I couldn't shake the vision of them inside my house, ordering furniture online, plotting a life while I stood outside helpless, my heart squeezing tighter with each tick of the clock. But I refused to back down. I called a meeting with some of the people who'd pledged their support, gathering their energy into a storm of collective resolve. We met outside a local cafe, and I watched as the sunlight bathed their faces, illuminating their shared anger. We weren't just confronting squatters. We were challenging a deeper malaise of corruption that infected the very systems meant to protect us. We need a plan, I declared, looking into each determined face. There was as much fire in their eyes as there was in mine. We talked and strategized, our voices building excitement, a fluttering energy in the air as we brainstormed ways to counteract Greg's smirk with legal arguments and public support. Our numbers allowed me to believe that change was possible. But amidst all this assertiveness, the nagging anxiety of time slipping through my fingers weighed heavily on my mind. Each day, I could feel the doubt creeping closer, a slow but persistent shadow that whispered against my bold proclamations. Time was an enemy, and every passing hour felt squandered. How long could I hold on to this hope while squatters reveled in what should have been my sanctuary? Despite every ounce of newfound resolve, I couldn't ignore the tightening knot in my stomach, knowing Mr. Thompson was out there, orchestrating it all like a puppeteer, ensuring the strings remained tangled. It wasn't just Greg standing in my way. It was a network of deceit I was only beginning to unravel. In that moment, it wasn't just about reclaiming my house, it was about reclaiming my life from a conspiracy larger than I ever imagined. That night, as I flopped onto my bed, an explosion of thoughts swirled around me, whirlwind of hope and fear. I could almost feel the walls closing in as they settled around me. And surely it would be just a matter of time before the storm would break. I needed to find some way to challenge their authority further, because it felt as if I was caught at the epicenter of something far more significant. What I didn't know then was that forces were poised to collide violently, and this showdown would linger not just in my mind, but in the very fabric of the Texas legal system. Little did I realize that the squatter's living room was more than a mere shelter for intruders. It was the backdrop for a confrontation that would reveal the darkest corners of real estate turmoil. My fight for my home had only begun, and the real battle was yet to come. As the haze of morning faded into a blistering afternoon, I found myself stuck in the same cycle, a relentless rhythm of determination battling against despair. It felt like I was trapped in an unyielding loop, oscillating between the sterile walls of the courthouse and the haunting remnants of my former life. Each day that passed deepened the gnawing void in my stomach, as I fought a war of attrition against my enemies, the squatters whose brazen audacity warranted a visceral reaction. Each knock on the door of the courthouse echoed my desperation, and with every visit, my hope wavered like a candle about to be extinguished. The glimmer of hope came in the form of a sympathetic lawyer, a resilient soul who agreed to take on my case pro bono. I clung to the feeling of relief, a buoy that lifted me above the suffocating waves of anxiety. Yet, the moment he glanced at the papers, his gasp resonated through the air like the chilling sound of a bell tolling at midnight. My heart plummeted as he outlined the harsh reality. The squatters had filed all the necessary paperwork, their claims coming equipped with shadows that obscured every entry in their file. It wasn't just a civil dispute, it was a meticulously orchestrated deception. With each passing phone call and every conversation with authorities, I could feel the suffocating walls of impending failure closing in around me, like a vice, tightening with every breath. The law felt like a flimsy barricade, designed to protect but warped in favor of those who knew how to exploit its vulnerabilities. It made no sense to me. How could they turn a blind eye to the destructive reality of this situation? How was it possible that a group of invaders could claim my sanctuary merely through a loophole? The injustice ignited a simmering fury within me that I could no longer suppress. Beyond the tumult of my rising dread, I found solace in envisioning my home. The laughter that once echoed through the walls, the warmth of familiar touches, even the faint yet comforting scent of cinnamon wafting from the kitchenette, all felt so dishearteningly distant. I craved the space that was once a representation of my aspirations and hopes, now commandeered by a cadre of trespassers. Every time I passed their faces on social media, or caught them moving in new pieces of furniture, a fresh wave of nausea smoothed over my resolve. Simultaneously, the once calm demeanor of Mr. Thompson felt like an impending storm looming on the horizon. I knew he was out there, orchestrating this chaos. I could imagine him basking in the warmth of the sunlight, while relishing my agony behind the privacy of closed doors. The smirk that danced upon his lips as he concocted his schemes fueled my determination. No one would hold my life hostage on his watch, not if I could help it. Days morphed into nights, and my sleep dwindled as stress gnawed at my mind. I spent hours drafting complaints, assembling evidence, and pacing like a caged animal, me mind ablaze with the fight for what was undeniably mine. Yet each flick of the pages on the legal documents seemed to mock my desperation, reminding me of the weight of betrayal I was fighting against. How did such systematic corruption seep into the very foundation of a community I once deemed safe? I took cautious solace in meeting other neighbors who had faced similar threats, their eyes flickering with the echoes of tragedy that resonated in my own. We shared stories, our frustrations melding like a cacophony, yet there existed an unspoken bond among us. Together we were stronger. We refused to be silent. One of them shouted defiantly, echoing the sentiment that burned within my chest. But could our collective voice echo loud enough to drown out the orchestrated silence, facilitated by Mr. Thompson? As I pored over yet another stack of legal jargon, I wondered if courage was enough. Would it manifest into tangible action that could challenge this corrupt structure? Inside me rose a tempest of emotions, the thrill of determination mixing strangely with the sickening dread of defeat. The daunting reality began to shape itself like a dark cloud hovering overhead, and I was desperate to find a beacon of light amidst this encroaching storm. Just when I felt the ivy of despair wrapping around me tighter, I received an unexpected Pacagea lead that could shift everything. Within the stack of pages was a news article about the loopholes in Texas squatters' rights that resembled my own story. My pulse quickened as I read the details of others who had bravely clawed their way back. Perhaps there existed a pathway to unveil the insidious ties between Mr. Thompson and my squatters, thus opening a door that had been sealed shut for far too long. In that moment, a clear resolve crystallized within me, stronger than any tide of despair that threatened to pull me under. I was not merely fighting for my home any longer. I was prepared to challenge a system that had played us all for fools, and there was something lurking on the edges of this legal battle that felt dangerously vital. The fight had changed. It was no longer solely about meat, it was about the collective struggle against those who took advantage of our trust, and I was ready to exploit every resource to retrieve my life. With a renewed vigor, I steeled myself for what lay ahead, knowing that deep within this unfolding saga were secrets tucked away like jagged shards waiting to cut at the heart of injustice. What awaited me in the next chapter was not just a quest to reclaim my home, but an unearthing of the truths lurking in the shadows of deceit. As the sun dipped low in the evening sky, casting long shadows across the courtroom, my heart raced with a potent mix of dread and defiance. Just as I thought I was getting closer to reclaiming my home, the squatters shattered my optimism when they produced a forged lease document, dated before I moved in. The flimsy paper, decorated with admittedly impressive signatures, became a frightening weapon in their hands, rocking the foundation of my burgeoning case. I slammed my hand against the table, the sound echoing through the silent room, feeling the weight of every betrayal suffocating me. "Your Honor, this document is fraudulent," I exclaimed, the desperation seeping into my voice as I gestured towards the squatters, who leaned back in their chairs with smug indifference. I was at a standstill, facing a legal nightmare bolstered by the very system that was supposed to protect me. The judge simply nodded, a flicker of irritation crossing her feature shardly, a flicker of support in a storm of deceit. Anger bubbled beneath the surface. It felt as if the entire world had sided with them, the forces of the law failing to serve my cause in this twisted game. A contemptuous smirk tugged at Mr. Thompson's lips as he leaned back, a consummate puppet master not even bothering to hide his satisfaction. My mind raced. How could I fight these shadowy forces when even the truth was skewered by their clever forgeries? As the chatter of the opposing counsel filled my ears, their cloaked conspiracies felt like armor against my truth. The document, though pathetic, effectively turned my world upside down, overshadowing my once clear claim and replacing it with chaos. My betrayal extended beyond just the squatters and Mr. Thompson. Neighbors I had known for years now looked at me with veiled mistrust as whispers fluttered through the neighborhood. I thought of Emily, the kind-hearted woman who always brought homemade cookies to our block parties, now spinning tales against me when her own dark interests aligned with the squatters. Each friendly face revealed masked agenda shod I'd truly been blind to the deceit prowling amongst us. I took a deep breath, remembering how the supportive arms of my community had rallied behind me, echoing their outrage over the audacity of the squatters. But now, nothing felt certain. The anguish in their eyes mirrored my own, weighed down by the possible truth that held them prisoner. Was I not fighting just for my home, but for their opinion of me as well? I mentally retreated as they filed in and out of court, a parade of excuses and winked conspiracies, my body heavy with a sense of impending loss. The threads of my hope unraveled late at night, when I found myself scrolling through the legal documents, again demanding a sneer from Mr. Thompson and a cascade of lies from Greg. Was there a crack in their fortress of lies, or had they simply fortified it through sheer audacity? I stared at the ceiling, the weight of the world pressing down on me, struggling to breathe against the ceaseless tide of filth that was gathering around me. My home, once the safe haven of my dreams, now seemed a mere illusion, caught in a brutal storm of deceit and betrayal. As I prepared to present my own evidence and edited account of events leading back to the signing of the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that every moment I spent in the courtroom dragged me further from the person I used to be. Searching for encouragement, I grasped for reminders of the life I had built, the garden I tended, the laughter that filled the air, the memories captured in every room. But with each tick of the clock, the reality of the situation loomed larger on my mind, whispering treacherous promises that I might never see those walls again. Yet in the midst of my spiraling thoughts, a flicker ignited within me. If I couldn't put together the pieces of my family, how could I put together this battle of hearts and homes? I couldn't let the squatters, nor the biting legal edges of the world, undermine my fight. I would need to unearth more, to dig deeper beyond what lay exposed on the table before me, into the hearts of those who perpetuated the storm. As the day wrapped up, I walked out of the courthouse, a silhouette of resilience against the fading light. Even if I felt shattered, I retained the fragments of a fierce spirit, a remnant of the warrior inside of me. I had no idea what lay next in this fight, but a palpable tension hummed through the air, indicating one last chance hovered on the horizon that could very well wrench everything back into balance. Was the key hidden somewhere unforeseen, or was it merely waiting for me to turn the right corner? A crucial step toward reclaiming everything I had lost. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm amber light across my cluttered living room, I felt a furious sense of determination wash over me. Weeks had passed in a relentless cycle of despair and frustration since my last court appearance, where the squatters had triumphed, wielding a forged lease like a weapon against my cries for justice. I wiped the sweat from my brow and settled onto the couch, my laptop lighting up the shadows around me, ready to dive into the depths of information that might finally turn the tide back in my favor. The past couple of months had drained me, but this evening would be different. I could feel it in my bones. A quick search led me to local news segments that were oddly illuminating about squatters' rights here in Texas. Each report revealed unsettling truths about legal loopholes and the fragility of property rights, a twisted framework that empowered casual trespassers to disrupt the lives of unsuspecting homeowners like me. As I listened to the testimonies of other victims, my heart raced with collective rage. It occurred to me that I had more than just a personal battle. I was entangled in a societal collapse, where victims of audacity and deception were left to fend for themselves against a system that offered little sanctuary. Fueled by this newfound anger, I decided I had to dig deeper, I needed to unearth every hidden detail surrounding my case. After countless hours of phone calls and emails, I finally connected with a whistleblower who had worked alongside Mr. Thompson in local real estate dealings. His voice trembled slightly as he detailed the underhanded connections between Mr. Thompson and the squatters, including Greg, who once claimed my home as theirs. The revelation struck me like lightning. I had been misled not only by the squatters, but by the very man who had sold me my dream. Mr. Thompson and the squatters? They've been working together long before you moved in, the whistleblower revealed, his tone laced with urgency. They orchestrated this entire ploy. It's all for money and control, and they think they can get away with it because of how absurd the laws are here. I listened with bated breath as he explained how they plotted to exploit the legal loopholes, laughing at how their audacity would flourish in such a poorly examined system. My resolve transformed into a blazing fire. With the evidence I gathered, I spent the next few days drafting a report filled with corroborated facts and timelines that would expose the web of deceit spun by Mr. Thompson and his clientele. I meticulously compiled the documentation of every interaction I had with him, from the initial house showing to the final sale, highlighting every vague answer and every stage of obfuscation. The tremors of betrayal coursed through me as I pieced it all together, transforming my rage into a potent weapon that I was finally ready to unleash. Just as I had prepared my case with this new evidence, I stumbled upon another layer of deception that collapsed my hopes like a house of cards. My heart sank when I learned that Mr. Thompson had manipulated his role as a real estate agent, exploiting Texas property laws in ways I hadn't even considered. He had acted as both predator and prey, playing the system while pretending to offer me sanctuary. To think that the man who had promised dreams of homeownership had conspired to strip me of my place felt like a betrayal deeper than I could ever have imagined. With a growing sense of urgency, I knew I had to act quickly before they tucked away more secrets under the cover of darkness. As the day of my next court appearance approached, a nervous anticipation filled the pit of my stomach. Armed with evidence and the unwavering patience of my friends and family, I felt the embers of hope reigniting within me. The squatter's arrogance would not last. I was determined to show the court precisely how I had become a victim of not only the squatters, but also of Mr. Thompson's duplicitous charm and ruthless tactics. I could visualize the courtroom buzzing with anticipation as I stood before the judge, ready to present the truth. The night before the hearing, I couldn't shake the weight of everything resting on my shoulders. Alone in the sterile glow of the kitchen, I whispered my fears into the stillness, wishing for all this nightmare to end. I cannot let them win. Not like this. I spoke aloud, clenching my fists like a shield against my doubts. Just then, a small recall of past memories stirred in Metha's smell of fresh paint in every room, the laughter of friends echoing in the halls, the small victories earned with each added plant in the garden. Outside these were moments stolen by the audacity of greed. The fight would continue. The demons of despair would not define me. As I finally lay my head down to rest, I felt an unexplainable wave of tranquility wash over me. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance, but a fierce warrior ready to reclaim my ground. Armed with evidence, a transformed heart, and a community of support behind me, I understood that tomorrow would not break me, nor would it bury my resolve. I was ready to face the courtroom, not just for my home, but to chase justice for everyone who had been cheated by people like Mr. Thompson and his band of trespassers. The dawn of that day was coming, and it promised the tumultuous storm would soon meet its reckoning. As the judge entered the courtroom, I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, amplifying my anxiety, yet I felt a surge of determination. This was at the moment where I would confront the architect of my despair, Mr. Thompson, and the squatters who had brazenly taken over my home while I spent my weekends away, thinking I could enjoy a brief respite from my troubles. I could finally lay bare the insidious web of deceit that had ensnared me. The air was thick with tension as I watched Mr. Thompson leaning casually against the wall, his arrogance palpable. He threw a dismissive glance my way, brushing off the weight of the situation like dust on his designer suit. I could already see the flicker of impatience in his eyes as the judge called the court to order. I had prepared meticulously for this moment, ready to unveil concrete proof of his collusion with the squatters, and I intended to make it unforgettable. The hearing commenced with the squatter Greg smugly sitting at the plaintiff's table, his back straight and a foolish grin smeared across his face. As the judge introduced the case, I felt a tight knot of rage at the injustice we faced. It was hard to believe that these invaders could claim my home, hiding behind legal loopholes crafted to protect them. My mind raced with images of my furniture, my pictures, my very life, all reduced to mere possessions in the hands of someone who had never owned a thing. My lawyer rose to present evidence first, laying out the timeline of events with surgical precision. Photos of my home, newly furnished with items ordered online during their usurpation, illuminated the absurdity of their claim. As each piece of evidence was introduced, I caught glimpses of Greg's confidence, wavering, his brow dampening with sweat, his smile faltering. I saw Mr. Thompson's facade begin to crack as well, his smooth exterior showing signs of genuine concern. In their hearts, they could not have anticipated the ferocity of my fight for what was rightfully mine. It was my turn to speak next, and I stood, channeling every ounce of bitterness and rage into a steady resolve. I recounted the heart-wrenching experience of returning to my home, only to find the locks changed, forcing me to confront the horror of my house, transformed into someone else's life. As I told my story of betrayal, the false promises of homeownership, and the shady dealings of Mr. Thompson, I saw the judge's expression shift from indifference to keen interest. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the reveal of the whistleblower's testimony. My heart raced as I called him to the stand. When he laid bare the underhanded connections between Mr. Thompson and the squatters, the air crackled with tension. The whispers and gasps echoed throughout the room as the truth took shape. Mr. Thompson's smirk crumbled into a scowl, and I savored that shift. His deceit was unfolding for everyone to see, titled "More Grotesque" by the day. As the evidence against Mr. Thompson continued to mount, it felt like I was dismantling the lies that had haunted me for months. I could see his confidence melting away, his arguments slipping through his fingers like sand. I pushed harder, presenting the forged lease documents they had relied upon, alongside testimony that had turned against them. Each revelation struck like a hammer, forging the steel of my resolve and tightening the noose around their machinations. Finally, after what felt like hours of excruciating testimony, the judge deliberated while the weight of my journey crashed into reality. As the silence thickened, I allowed myself a fleeting moment to reflect on everything this battle meant. I had faced my greatest fears, fought tooth and nail against corruption, and regained a sense of agency in an increasingly helpless world. A moment later, the judge cleared his throat, and I felt my breath hitch, praying for justice. Given the evidence presented, the judge began, his tone unwavering. The court rules in favor of the original homeowner. In that instant, a wave of relief washed over me, so potent that I almost staggered. The vindication surged like wildfire in my veins as I looked at Greg and Mr. Thompson, their faces twisting in disbelief. The posturing had been stripped away, and they had been outmaneuvered. I savored the moment, standing tall as I sensed the warmth of victory enveloping me. I was coming home at last. The laughter of friends, the color of the walls, and the scent of my garden awaited my return. As I walked out of the courtroom, invigorated by the understanding that audacity would not prevail, I knew my battle had significance beyond my ownership. I had drawn a line against injustice, and now the dawn of a new chapter awaited me. In reclaiming my home, I had reclaimed a piece of my soul,